The holy dove heralds the receding of flood waters. The holy chalice waters the great desert. The patriarch goes to the top of the mountain. Jesus walks with you through the valley of death. The indwelling spirit is with the seeker after truth. These vessels are not empty. They are of the fullness of heaven. So this actually is my symbol, which actually combines the idea of the dove and the chalice. I actually saw something incredible in a book about the catacombs, the Christian catacombs of ancient Rome, and on this side of a Christian tomb was inscribed an inverted pentagram, which has always been traditionally associated with evil for some reason. But I don't know why this is, because when you actually draw it like this, you've got the two sort of wings of the dove, or the two handles of the chalice, and then this is the dove descending. This is its head, and its tail is up there. But you've also carrying the chalice as well, or raising the chalice over the altar as well. So the chalice is this part here. But the idea is that the dove and the chalice are both partake of the fullness of heaven, which is a concept in Gnosticism, which is very, very important indeed, as opposed to the emptiness or relative emptiness of the realms of the demiurge, which are emptying themselves, or are increasingly empty as you descend the levels, and until you get to the sphere of the shells, that are completely empty, and they are closed also to the ineffable light. So if these are Sephiroth, then they receive a light, and as they go down to Malkut, they receive less and less light, because they're more and more closed up. And then you get the Qipot, which is the shells, which are completely enclosed and completely empty. Although it is said that is why they feed on the psychic energy of human beings or other sentient beings of the soul, because of course they're desperate for an unconditional infinite source of energy and love, which they don't have. I actually wonder how they can possibly feed, because if they're actually completely shells, there's no light can get in, and surely there's nothing for them to get out of, as it were. They can't leave their own shell in order to go feeding. So I think some of the deep Qipot or shells are literally shells. I mean, there's absolutely nothing in them. But the point about it is that if you choose to dwell on these empty shells, if you're looking at them all the time, then you build up a pattern of depression in your mind. Whereas if you look above, if you look at the Sephiroth that are receiving the ineffable light, and you gaze upon the upper reaches of the tree of life, the Sephiroth, which are Choma and Binah, especially, or Hesed and Gebura, I suppose, then you actually are inspired, and you are uplifted by what you see rather than depressed by what you see. So I guess it's all part of perception, really. If your mood changes, then you can actually see more of the light, and then the light also changes your mood. So it's a virtuous cycle. Whereas, of course, if you're depressed and you're looking down at the Qipot, then the Quipots are going to make you more depressed. So this is a vicious cycle. So you want to try and get out of the vicious cycles, and go into the virtual cycles virtuous cycles if you possibly can. You see, but I mean that's just for us at the lower. The important thing to remember is that all the vessels, like the Christ, the patriarch, the dove, the chalice, and the indwelling spirit, these are all partake of the fullness of heaven and the fullness of God the Father. So you are when you look at the chalice, when you think about the chalice, contemplate the chalice, which I like to do very often because I find it's a very powerful symbol. Um, then you partake of the fullness of heaven. You see, or if you think about the doves as well coming down, after the flood to Noah, or you think about the patriarch Moshe or Moses going up to the top of the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments, or you think about Jesus Christ, walking in the wilderness, I prefer, actually, to be perfectly honest, I sort of prefer the impersonal symbols of dove and chalice, especially the chalice. Um, I like the fact that chalice is being wrought out of metal and gold. Perhaps I'm rather an earthy sort of person, and I like it that somebody has wrought the chalice out of the metals of the earth. I like it better even than the dove, and I relate to the chalice better than almost than the personal image of Jesus on one hand, and the historical image of Moses on the other for some reason. I mean, I realise that they're all the same. They're all filled with spirit, but I find that of these four elements, I like the chalice most of all, I suppose. And indeed, I seem to have put the chalice on the I put the chalice on fire, and I put Jesus on the water, and I put the patriarch on air, and then I put the dove on earth, which is very interesting. I don't know. I didn't mean to do that, really. I just sort of looked at it. If you turn the pentagram upside down, you get a different attribution of the elements. And the indwelling spirit, of course, is with the seeker always. So that's just a reflection of the Holy Spirit within each of us, each seeker. We have an individual vision of the Holy Grail, which is why the Holy Grail partakes of spirit, the topmost part of the pentagram, or in this case, the bottom part of the pentagram. So I like this symbol though, representing the dove and the chalice. I think it's very beautiful. It has a kind of it has a very potent energy about it. Actually, I've always thought that the inverted pentagram as a very powerful image, really, of things descending from heaven to earth. And as symbolized by the dove itself, and lots of biblical references to light coming down from on high, I'm thinking also of the plague of frogs and the rain of fire and all this stuff in the Old Testament. There's always things coming down from the sky, because these obviously, we're sky god worshippers, really, aren't we? Things, but I mean, obviously things are rising up from the earth as well. It doesn't really matter where they're rising up from or coming down from. Obviously in the world of non-dualism, direction and space and time absolutely mean nothing at all. So they have no value. All these dimensions and space and time, and when things happened and the sequence they happened in, it doesn't really matter, because we're just looking at it from our space-time lower worlds perspective. If you're looking from everything from the point of view of the supernal worlds, you wouldn't really know what anyone was talking about when they said up and down and right and left and good and bad and hot and cold. I mean, what would these things mean? They would be nothing to you, right? Because you'd be in non-dualism. So, but they would mean there would be something to experience in the non-dualistic worlds. Of that, I'm absolutely certain. But it's not something that you can possibly put into words, because all the words are based on experiences in the dualistic world. So, words fail you literally, and they must do. You know what I mean? They must do. So the experience that you would have in heaven would by nature, even if you could return from heaven and try and explain to people what you experience, you couldn't explain it. I mean, you'd be silent, you'd be deaf, you'd be dumb. You couldn't speak. Anyway, so this is another little sort of musing I had on a possible symbol for gnosis, a very high symbol for gnosis.